And as 14 Nigerian banks out of over 40 meet recapitalization threshold, we're now joined from Lagos for a chat by Professor Segun Ajibola. He's a former president, Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight. Well, 14 banks meeting the recap target out of 40. Does this indicate, and 6 months before the deadline, is this a sign that the Nigerian banking sector is healthy, doing well? And why is it important to do this recapitalization now?
Yes, thank you, moderator, and good evening. The recapitalization exercise, we could say that with the current state of the economy, the value of our local currency, vis-a-vis the volume of transactions passing through the banks, the need for raising the minimum level of capital had arisen as at the time that policy was rolled out. However, issues as to what level of capitalization will match the strength of the economy vis-a-vis the banking system, and the timing, and what happens in the event that some banks are unable to meet that level of capitalization. These are the issues. It's quite a very comforting piece of news from the regulators that 14 banks have met the minimum capital requirement. But 14 out of how many banks? Out of 42 banks. So I think the challenge is what happens with about 28 other banks that have not met. In the event that the deadline catches these banks and they are unable to meet the minimum capitalization requirement, what will be the issues on the table between the regulators and the operators at this point? Moderator, you refer to what happened in 2004. As novel as that recapitalization exercise was, it had some fundamental flaws, some of which still remain with the industry as of today. It was an imposed policy that was never discussed, and it came so suddenly that at the end of the day, marriages of inconveniences, unholy alliances, forcing together strange bedfellows happened in 2004, 2005. And by the time the impact of those ones settled in the industry, we saw the casualties in 2008, 2009. So there were lots of good things that came with that policy in 2004, but they came with lots of flaws. In fact, the question then was, must all banks meet the same level of capitalization of 25 billion? And some of us canvassed for this categorization, but nobody listened then. Okay. We saw the impact. So the good things, some of the good things now is that there is element of capitalization that is tiered, in other words, into various categories. International 500 billion, national 200 billion, regional 50 billion, and so on. Then for other categories of banks. So that has given some leverage for those who are operating in the industry to find their level. But like I said, the most fundamental issue now is between now and 31st March, what can these other 27, 28 banks that have not been able to meet that minimum level, what can they do?
Okay.
Are we going to see another false alliances? Marriages of inconvenience? 2004, we saw destruction of some of the best corporate cultures.
All right, Professor Ajibola.
Corporate practices.
Professor Ajibola, thank you very much. If you can hear me, I mean,
Lost in the exercise. I can hear you.
Great. Fantastic. You make very valid point, and you ask, the right question as well. What happens should they not meet? But again, partly you have mentioned it that we've been here before. It's not new. And then you have what you called unholy alliances and marriages and all of that. But for the Nigerians watching tonight who have their monies in these banks, 16 out of 40, I don't see that as a pass mark anywhere. But the CBN describes this as banks being resilient in Nigeria. Should Nigerians be reassured that their monies are safer? Or are you concerned that this is a total waste of an exercise and should not have happened?
No, definitely is an exercise that is worth the while. The level of capitalization of banks up till now, before this recent exercise, was becoming too low to handle the volume of transactions passing through the banks. So the policy of raising the minimum capital level from what it was 50, 25, 10 billion to the new levels, I think, generally speaking, that was a welcome decision. But the fear, like you said, moderator, is 14 out of 42. We have 28 banks still trying to struggle with their faith. What happens at the end of the day? So we have to talk about risk management generally. How do we manage the risks inherent in some of these 28 banks not being able to meet the minimum capitalization level? This has a lot of implications. For example, in 2004, some shareholders lost out completely because their banks could not agree with any of the surviving banks then to go into any form of alliance. So at the end of the exercise, they were just left hanging. And they fell by the wayside. So that is the experience of 2004. How do we save the system from that kind of embarrassment this time around?
Right.
That those who had nothing to contribute to the policy will become the victims, shareholders. So, and that's number one. Number two, how do we prevent the kind of unholy alliances, marriage of strange bedfellows, loss of very good, very sound corporate banking practices by some of the fairly smaller banks then, but they couldn't meet the minimum capitalization requirement, and they were swallowed by banks. And at the end of the day, abuse of good corporate governance is here and there. How do we prevent all those things between now and March?
Prof, if I may ask very quickly before we wrap. So what options would you say are on the table for banks who may not be able to recapitalize before the deadline? What are the options? Mergers, well, you talk about strange bedfellows. What are the options before them?
Well, maybe regulators may want to grant them some extension. If they look at the plans and programs of the shareholders, is there the likelihood, if given some time, additional time, extension of the deadline, any likelihood based on what they could present to the authorities? That's number one. Can there be extension of deadlines? Number two, could they be advertised for best investors from anywhere to come in and rescue them? Number three, is there anything the regulators can do? Perhaps by way of encouraging corporate, I don't want to say public, but corporate investors coming to their aid. One thing I would want to appeal against is this forced marriage. It didn't bring anything good to the banking industry in 2004.
Yeah.
So if for whatever reason, just for reason of survival, for reason of wanting to remain afloat, that kind of unholy alliances come into play this time around, it may pollute the entire exercise. And at the end of the day, erode all the benefits that may come.
Professor Segun
So
Ajibola,
I think
yes,
everybody should put on the thinking camp, including the bankers committee. What can be done to avoid the pitfalls of 2004?
All right.
I may not have all the answers here now.
We have to say
But
thank you.
I think it's a question that is that is staring everybody in the face.
Thank you very much, Prof. Professor Segun Ajibola, former president, Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria. Adesua, no forced marriage is good, whether by the banks or, regular
Nothing
individuals.
forced.
Nothing forced.
Can be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.